This one secret will drastically help you climb the ranks, and the best part is, you can immediately apply this advice to any hero straight after you watch this video. And funnily enough, I'm not going to waste your time because the secret is timing. For keen viewers of mine, you'll know that I made a video on timing quite a while back, but considering we're in Overwatch 2, so people may not have seen that video, and there's also some stuff that I missed out on, I thought I'd redo the video that will be the definitive timing video. For those who don't know what I mean when I say timing, I'm referring to timing your pressure with when your team or the enemy team engages. If you're still a little confused on what I mean, let me do some explaining. So fundamentally, Overwatch is a simple formula that comes down to two main things, being timing and positioning. You may have heard people like Video Game Donkey describe the game as such.
Nearly every Overwatch match is decided by positioning and timing. Can your team sync up good enough to push? Can you get your flankers and your front line moving in at the same time? If not, you lose.
And of course, there's going to be more factors like communication, mindset, mentality, fight planning, tempo, kill boxes, and even more, so if you guys want to see me make a video on all that stuff, do let me know down below. But fundamentally, for most players, timing and positioning are the two key things you have to worry about. Timing refers to when you choose to pressure the enemy team, and positioning refers to where you are with regards to exerting that pressure. So why am I not making a video about positioning? Well, positioning can be a lot more complicated and a lot more fluid than something like timing. Positioning can be defensive or aggressive, there's the distance and sightlines you can play, the usage of corners, having an escape route, and trying to fit all that information against different types of compositions on different maps can be a really daunting and complex task. If you've watched pretty much any of my guides, you'll know that I try to condense positioning into 4 rules, but there's certainly more nuance to it for each hero, which is actually why you might want to get coaching, linked down below. With timing though, it's pretty universal to every hero, and there's 3 main categories: timing your pressure early, timing it at the same time as your team, or timing your pressure late. I guarantee that in every single ranked game you've played, you've mistimed your pressure at least once. And the great thing about timing is that it's super easy to fix. So, I'm briefly going to describe the 3 categories of timing, and then I'll delve into each role in the game, seeing how you could time your pressure better. So with timing your pressure early, 9 times out of 10, this is often a mistake on any role in the game. The only time you'd ever want to do this is to create space or to be a distraction to allow your team to push through a tough choke. I think a really good example of this would be on Paraiso first point attack. I'm sure you know how oppressive this high ground is, and I'm sure you've been held here on first point before, solely because of that. Well, if you're playing a mobile hero, like a Tracer, you could simply blink through underneath and begin to pressure on points. What this does is that the enemy team will turn around and focus you, allowing your team to walk through underneath the high ground, and then you can just simply blink out. By you going first there and going in earlier than the rest of your team, you yourself are kind of the tank by drawing away their attention. Now I will say that the rest of your team will need to push in when you do this, so it is best done when you have some form of communication, but forcing point to create space and divert attention is certainly something you can do without communication. Now, what about timing pressure at the same time as your team? Well, this is the advice you'll hear from pretty much every creator. You don't time your pressure too early, otherwise you'll get your cooldowns forced out and your team will be taking a 5v4, and you don't time your pressure too late, otherwise there's a risk that you'll be doing too little too late. Maybe one of your teammates get picked off because you were too late to pressure. As a result, this is kind of the Goldilocks of timing. But, whilst it is pretty risk-free, there are cases where you do want to time your pressure a bit earlier, as I've just explained, or a bit later, as I'll explain now. When I say timing your pressure late, I only mean by a few seconds maximum. The reason why timing your pressure just a bit late, even by half a second, can make such a big difference to the damage you deal, is because your team are going to be drawing 99% of the attention away from you. Here's a perfect example of what I mean with Alpha Yi on the Tracer. Notice how Ben Best on the Winston jumps first, which draws the attention of Luke Mino on the Ana. Just half a second later, Alpha Yi pops up on the elevator and manages to one-clip Luke Mino. And notice Luke Mino's body language. He's looking at the Winston and not Alpha Yi, and this does 2 things. It means Alpha Yi takes less damage because Luke Mino is busy shooting the Winston, and it also means that Alpha Yi can more easily get a one-clip because Luke Mino isn't focused or worried about trying to juke the Ana. If Alpha Yi went early here, he probably would have died because he left the engagement on 24 HP. So really good coordination there by the Justice. However, because I like shitting on the Eternal there, Rakatak really needs to be marking that elevator. Tracer has no vertical mobility, and if he just landed a 25 damage boop, Alpha Yi will die there, so there's another classic Eternal fumble. Eternal, if you need a new coach, I'm your mans. I will legit work for you guys for free. Now I want to cover the roles and how you should integrate timing into your play. Starting off with the tank role. On any tank you play, you need to synchronize your pressure with your backline, which, in general, can be quite vague to say the least. I'm sure you've heard the term trading backlines, which just means that when your backline is being attacked, you need to attack their backline. If their Winston jumps your Ana Zen, you as Orisa spear spin their backline. But there's also the other approach of just punishing the tank. I've spoken about this before, but with Reinhardt, you'll see pro Ryan players like Hardy head straight for the Winston instead of trading out backlines. So how do you know which option do you do? Well, generally speaking, if you're playing against the mobile, glass cannon squishies like Ana, Zen, and Ashe, that's when you should be trading backlines, or at least directing their attention towards you. The reason for that is that there's key cooldowns and damage that you need to block. However, if you're playing against something more slippery, like a Lucio, Kiriko, or Moira, then you can afford to just pummel in the other tank. Now moving on to DPS, and things become a lot simpler for the majority of the cast. There's not really any special advice for most of the DPS cast, just apply the advice given about early, same, or late timing. I will say that the more aggressive your flank is, the later it needs to be timed. This is especially important for mobile DPS heroes like a Widowmaker, Bastion, and a Cassidy in High Noon, who are basically glass cannons. If you peek too early and the enemy team know where you are on a flank, then you've severely kneecapped the pressure that you can dish out. Lastly, moving on to supports. My specific tip to main supports, being Lucio, Brig, and Mercy, is to focus on good timing of your fundamentals. This does seem a bit vague, but hopefully you'll see what I mean. Starting off with Lucio. A lot of Lucios, even the ones in the metal ranks, will often get the part of speeding the team at the right time, whether that be speeding through a tough choke or speeding back to retreats. However, a lot of Lucios don't know when to stop speeding the team and to then help with off-angle pressure. For instance, on King's Row third point attack, you can speed your Reinhardt to close the distance and then start wall riding on high ground to deal with any threats. I commonly see a lot of Lucios just skip straight ahead to the Reddit playstyle, i.e. dealing with threats on high grounds, which is a form of bad timing since more often than not, you're just going to be playing way more aggressively than the rest of your team. Next up is Mercy. The fundamental behind Mercy is damage boost. That's why you pick the hero, and most players struggle to time the damage boost with when their team are aggressively pushing, which can lead to big desyncs or even teammates dying. For instance, if there's a Cassidy or a Soldier running backwards and a Zenyatta pushing forward to land a big right click, you should obviously be damage boosting the Zen, but most Mercy players are just too lazy to even switch, and there's countless examples of this throughout a single match. Lastly, with Brig, it's all about closing the distance and knowing when to do so. Generally speaking, as the teamfight progresses, you should be closing the distance more and more to land your melee swings in, also looking to help out your DPS if need be. Finally, onto flex supports. Likewise to off tanks, flex supports often play around their game-changing cooldowns, and timing them well is key to winning. That could be using Suzu or Lamp a bit earlier, or timing that perfect purple nades, or timing your orbs when your DPS take a flank. And that's it for the video. I hope you learned something new, especially that advice about timing your pressure just half a second later. Shout out to my tier 1 Patreons, Remy Kane and Tyler Bishop, as well as tier 3 Patreon Dappy Amen. Until next time.